Hey Sopranos fans, welcome to another episode here on Bully Whispers, and we're here today to evaluate Law 14 of Robert Greene's 48 Laws of Power, Pose as a Friend, Work as a Spy, in the TV show The Sopranos. Now this may seem like a weird law to have as Livia's superpower, since other than Junior, she never really even pretends to be anyone else's friend, but if you stick with me and hear me out, you'll see that it actually is. So in this episode, we will evaluate the different methods of spying by starting off with the most common method, the use of others as spies, as shown through Johnny Sac, as well as the dangers of using them, as shown through Detective Makazian, before moving on to different methods of doing the spying for yourself, as shown through Tony and Feech, the potential pitfalls, as shown through Big Pussy, as well as how to avoid them, and the biggest potential problem, as shown through Tony and Jack Mazarone. Then we will move on to Livia's Law 14 superpower, which makes her possibly the best spy of the bunch, and end with a reversal of the law in action. According to Greene, the most common method of spying is to get others to do it for you, but not necessarily by hiring Black Cube or some sort of private investigator. Instead, he refers to getting people who work for or are close to your target and putting them on your team, so to speak, which no one seems to do better than Johnny Sac. Despite claiming he doesn't want to stick his beak in, Johnny ends up bringing both Paulie and Ralphie into his fold, and ends up getting quite a bit of information from them, both business and otherwise.
First Johnny knows about flipping the property by the Esplanade. Not a shit.
But Greene also notes that this is a risky method of spying for two main reasons. First, your spies may turn against you for one reason or another, which we see with Paulie. And second, you have no real control over what they do or how they act, which Tony found out when he had Detective Makazian follow Dr. Melfi.
She left her blinds up. I got some of them Victoria's Secret type snaps.
Makazian goes rogue when he stops Melfi on her date, leaving her stupefied and Tony irritated. This certainly isn't what Tony would have wanted, but he has no control over his spies when they aren't in his presence, which is why Greene says it's better to be the spy yourself, but how do you do that? According to Greene, Talleyrand was one of the best gatherers of information in history, and one of his most effective methods was a rather indirect one. He would act as if he accidentally let a secret out, which was of course fake, and watch how people reacted to it. Based on their reaction, he was able to gain a sense of where they stand on a particular issue. As Baron von Stetten put it, Talleyrand fires a pistol into the air just to see who will jump out the window. Now, Tony is able to gain information about Feech in a similar manner, although he didn't set it up specifically for Feech. After Carmela tells him people only laugh at his jokes because he is boss, he goes to a card game and intentionally tells a bad joke just to see if people will laugh, and they all do except Feech. Later on, Tony remembers this and realizes Feech isn't on his side. By throwing something out there Tony knew was stupid, he was able to gain insight on people based on their reactions. This is often a more effective method than trying to probe for information because it arouses less suspicion, and once people are suspicious of you, they will either shut down conversations.
You sure cried like a baby that night. I think the family was relieved he got taken out.
Really? Hey, waiter!
Or avoid you entirely. When trying to gather information directly, Greene says the important thing is to avoid business talk and keep the conversation to friendly chatter.
Oh, howdy. How's your rash? It's itchy.
Letting them be the ones to take the conversation in the business direction so that you aren't suspected. However, when going the friendly chit-chat route, it's also important that it feel natural and not awkward, otherwise they may get suspicious, and if they do, it reveals information about yourself, which we see when Tony tries to feel out whether or not Jack Mazarone is flipped.
Everything else okay? Good EKG and shit, huh?
Yeah, I guess.
All right.
But I got to tell you, I don't like what I'm hearing.
Tony had tipped his hand, and Mazarone knew something was up. Fortunately for Tony, Mazarone never did anything with that insight, but had he made that same mistake with someone who was a bit shrewder and actually a gangster, it could have spelled disaster for Tony. Now, with all this talk of friendly chit-chat and pleasant relations, it may seem like an odd place to bring up Livia's superpower.
Look, I know how to talk to people.
But Greene does mention one other effective method, irritating the living shit out of people, and in this capacity, Livia is pretty much unrivaled. Since, according to Greene, the main purpose of all of this is to gain some level of control over future events, in order to evaluate Livia, we must first determine what Livia wanted to see in those future events, and as far as we can tell, other than just generally wreaking havoc, her most consistent goal seems to be taking Tony down. So let's take a look at how she uses some of the previously mentioned concepts in her efforts to do so. In the show, we see two main instances where, intentionally or not, she almost takes Tony out. The first is through Junior, and the second through Tony himself. With Junior, perhaps she was only pretending to be his friend, perhaps she wasn't, and if she was just pretending, it makes her maneuver all the more impressive. Essentially, what she did was a proactive version of the Talleyrand strategy. After spending some time getting Junior irritated towards Tony over going to a shrink, she lets out a secret, this one real of course, about the New York guys having their meetings in Green Grove.
Suits? Pleurisy? More than once he was here?
When she sees Junior's reaction, she eggs him on a little more.
Well, maybe it was you they were talking about. Who knows?
And then she lets out the big secret.
3 of my capos have their mothers in this place?
Instead of living in normal homes with their sons.
This must be some kind of fucking end move.
All the while acting this was entirely accidental.
Oh, God. What did I say now?
Much like Talleyrand. And if the purpose of all of this is to gain some level of control over future events, then it's important to note here that the hit attempt that this led to was the closest we ever see Tony to intentionally getting hit throughout the series. I specify intentionally because Tony was obviously shot by Junior, but by that point Junior wasn't all there mentally, so it's not really the same thing. In her interactions with Tony, Livia had already spent a lifetime irritating him, and we see why Greene says this is effective around the end of Season 2. According to Greene, one of the main purposes of the irritation strategy is to get them to lose control, hopefully reveal some secrets or weaknesses, and it worked.
One more minute, if I could have just stood there saying, yes, Ma, okay, Ma, I hear you, Ma. One more fucking minute, I wouldn't be in this spot.
In this instance, Tony didn't just show a weakness, he gave her a physical manifestation of a weakness in the form of stolen airline tickets that could potentially get him locked up. Of course, nothing really ever came of this since Livia died, but I am curious to see down in the comments how many of you think she would have testified had she lived. Either way, this is probably the closest we see Tony getting into legal trouble till the end of the show with Carlo, and if Livia had lived to testify, it definitely would have been. So through the entire series, the closest we see to Tony getting either killed or locked up both come as a result of Livia combining a little bit of Talleyrand's plausible deniability with a whole lot of her ability to piss people off. This is all especially impressive considering that, at face value, pose as a friend, act as a spy wouldn't seem to apply to Livia whatsoever, but the devil is in the details, and it's in the details of Law 14 that Livia finds her superpower. I guess it only makes sense that both Livia and the devil can be found in the same place. Now, like most of the power laws, Law 14 has a reversal, and it's pretty straightforward. Just like you spy on people, people will spy on you, which we see throughout the show from the FBI. According to Greene, the best way to deal with that is to put out so much false information that the truth gets lost, which is pretty much what Big Pussy is trying to convince everyone he did.
I'm telling you, this disinformation shit is an effective technique. It's a friggin' ace.
Like Winston Churchill said, the truth is so precious that she should always be attended to by a bodyguard of lies. Well, thanks for watching another episode here on Bully Whispers. As always, like, comment, subscribe, and I'll see you at the next score.